Do you remember your first museum visit? Or a time when you felt inspired walking around a museum? What if you had the chance to help give someone their best ever museum memory? Well, now you do. The National Gallery of Art is recruiting for 2 volunteer opportunities this fall to be one of the friendly faces behind their information desks and the guides who lead their school tours. The National Gallery is hosting information sessions throughout the fall, and they hope you'll join them to learn more and apply. Visit nga.gov/volunteer for more information. That's nga.gov/volunteer.
Today on CityCast DC, I'm here with CityCast's Julia Karron and Kaela Cote-Stemmermann, and we are talking about taxpayer money. First for a stadium scoreboard, and then for a boost in food assistance. And in both cases, we're going to talk about what the debate says about where DC stands right now. Plus, Pandas. They are leaving, as you may have heard, and we have feelings. Today is Friday, October 6th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. All right, so Julia, DC owns Nats Park, where the baseball team plays. And Nats Park has a scoreboard that is 15 years old. And they want a new one. So what happens now?
Yeah. So obviously it is time for an upgrade to that scoreboard. There's also going to be minor upgrades around like the ballpark. That means like including switching some food vendors around, like very basic stuff like that. The problem with this is that it comes at a cost.
Wait, can I stop you for a second? You said obviously it needs an upgrade. Is that obvious, like in the rest of baseball or the world?
I mean, it is 15 years old, and some of the technology in newer baseball stadiums is a lot better. Better replays, better, like, you can see it from better angles, all that kind of stuff. So 15 years in technology, at least in this case, makes a big difference.
Does it, though? I don't mean to be querulous here, you guys, but, like, the baseball team is a monopoly. Like, it's not like people are going to be like, well, I don't like that sucky-ass scoreboard. I'm going to drive to Atlanta and watch a game.
Hypothetically, if you support the Nationals, you could spend a lot of money and like go to Atlanta. You could also shell out for money for the Beltway series in Baltimore. But if you want to watch a home game and you want to be able to see the actual plays and you're in the upper decks and you want your viewing experience to be decent and you can actually see the thing, then yes, a scoreboard update in this case is kind of necessary in order to keep fans in the stands, you know?
So, excuse my ignorance here.
Sure.
But so the scoreboard is supposed to be not only the scores of the teams, but it's supposed to have like the, you know, like the instant action replays and like stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does it have that right now? Like, is it currently functioning in that way?
It does function in that way. It is the quality in which it functions. Basically, they want like higher resolutions and stuff.
Oh, fancy. Okay.
Okay, we get it. But like the rub is the money, yes?
That is correct. The current estimate is somewhere between $20 and $22 million.
That's an expensive TV.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a very expensive TV. Yeah. It's a lot. Basically, what's happening is Events DC, which is the public-private partnership company that maintains the ballpark that DC owns, has said that they're footing the bill. Basically, what's going to happen is because DC proper owns the stadium under this entity and then leases it to the Nats can't pay for the scoreboard, or they don't have to. So Events DC is going to do it, and essentially because of that, and because it's managed by the DC government, we are the ones that are going to have to put up the money.
And I assume everyone is super psyched about this because it's just a great investment, and and universally there's adoration for baseball and an understanding that fans need the most up-to-date possible scoreboard.
You know, I don't know. I would prefer that my $20 million in taxes, or my portion of that $20 million in taxes, maybe goes to something else. But that is what they have decided. They have been arguing about this for a couple of months. There was a recent Washington Post report in June. They had discussed using the ballpark revenue fund. This was that special pot of money that was funded from a ballpark tax early on, back when they were bringing the team to DC. It also taxes sales on Nats Park and public utilities and telecom companies to try to pay for the improvements, which would include like a new energy efficient stadium lighting system, in addition to just like the new scoreboard and video screens. So they're trying to jam all this stuff into one. Basically, hopefully what happens is they use the ballpark revenue fund and they don't have to tax us as much. Pretty please? You know? That'd be nice.
Wait, so, this is a subset of this argument that we have been talking about on our pod and around town about taxpayers and stadiums. And it's an old argument. It happens everywhere. We're about to come into a debate about a new stadium for the Commanders. The Wizards and Capitals have, publicly taken meetings with Virginia about maybe moving there. But what the real goal, I think, is to get taxpayer help in fixing up their arena in Gallery Place. And the debates, it's pretty familiar, right? Like on the one hand, it's, hey, why should we pay money to billionaire owners of teams that pay their athletes hundreds of millions of dollars, et cetera? And on the other hand, it's, hey, these facilities have great impact on economic development and so on. I gotta say, the scoreboard thing, it's a little bit weirder to me just because I can't imagine that unless the team is going to leave for want of a scoreboard, I'm not really seeing where the benefit to us, the citizens, and those of us who aren't into baseball, I can't see where the benefit is.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really tough argument. Like, I would also say Nats Park isn't just used for the Nationals. I was supposed to see Bruce Springsteen a week ago on Friday.
But you didn't go because the stadium scoreboard sucked.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason. No, he has a stomach ulcer or whatever it was, and he's canceled his tour for like the rest of the calendar year. But in that instance, right, it's not just baseball that this would benefit. It would benefit every event, hypothetically, that happens at Nats Park. That would include like concerts and like when they do the Christmas markets out there. Like it would hopefully benefit that as well, right? It wouldn't only just be like these baseball people who make billions of dollars are the only people benefiting. It's hypothetically like, yeah, people who want to go see Bruce Springsteen and maybe don't have a great view of the stage can look at a scoreboard and say, hey, I can actually see.
Wait. But you're telling the benefit here is for people who can afford concert tickets that cost hundreds of dollars. Usually the argument is phrased around like, yes, but all that economic activity will lead to a growth in the tax base and it'll pay off for people who would never go to a concert. Are they making that argument here?
I mean, hypothetically, that is true. I think the other thing to remember is that, like, Nats Park generally is this weird anomaly in sports stadiums where it's somehow, like, created or changed and gentrified this neighborhood that did not have a ton going on before. And on top of that, like, has drawn, obviously, a ton of new restaurants and stuff there. Every stadium that gets built wants to model itself after Nats Park, where they build the stadium and there's all this economic opportunity that goes around it and there's housing and all of this happens. That said, like the money that the government has, would I prefer that they used on something else? Sure. But if they've got it and they're going to spend it on a scoreboard, I think they're going to just buck up and spend it on the scoreboard, you know?
All right, it's Mike here. If you have been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you have heard me talk about Car Care to Go before. Well, they just changed their name to Roda, R-O-D-A, but it is still the same great service. It's made exactly for folks like me who forget about an oil change until the blinking light reminds them, and then forget about it again after I go to the local garage and find out that they're busy. Roda simplifies all that. You make an appointment, they pick up your ride, and they bring it back a few hours later with the oil change, the wipers replaced, or any of the other hundreds of services they offer completed. I got a freebie the first time, but the price is pretty good even without it. They're accessible all over DC, and their work is covered by a great warranty to give you peace of mind. Instead of sitting in a waiting room drinking bad coffee, why not sit at home and drink your own coffee while they do the work? Get your first oil change for just $20.23. That's 2023, get it? With the code HEYDC20. That's HEYDC20. Sign up at roda.com, that's RODA.com, with the code HEYDC20.
Picture this. You're at the airport or strolling through the grocery store, and suddenly there they are, someone who seems tailor-made for you, You know that feeling, right? That instant connection you can't ignore. But then they leave. Another missed connection? Not so fast. Introducing Never Missed, the revolutionary dating app that turns those chance encounters into unforgettable beginnings. It's simple. Download the Never Missed app for free right now on the App Store or on Google Play. In just moments, you'll be ready to transform fleeting glances into lasting connections. Don't let serendipity slip through your fingers. Embrace the possibility and excitement of finding your someone right when you least expect it. Download the Never Missed app and make your story of how you met an unforgettable chapter in your journey.
All right, so speaking of money they've got, last year when DC was making its budget, there was a big debate about boosting the amount of money for SNAP, which is the benefit formerly known as food stamps, and for other forms of like cash assistance to augment like some of the pandemic assistance that had come out, particularly for groups that were not included in that. Like there's people in like the cash economy, like street vendors, as well as undocumented immigrants. The way they wound up was, okay, if DC gets more tax revenue in the fiscal year 2023 than had been expected at that time, then automatically this boost will happen. And lo and behold, for those of you who didn't notice, the fiscal year ended on September 30th. I wasn't invited to the New Year's party. And revenues came in like significantly higher, $178 million higher. Now, like, the city budget's in the billions, so it's not like that much. But that was unexpected. And so this spending gets triggered. So it'll temporarily boost food assistance by $40 million, as well as $20 million in direct cash assistance to these folks who are locked out of pandemic aid. $20 million, same amount as the scoreboard.
That's ironic.
I know, right?
But you know what struck me about it is, like, for years, for the last, I don't know, 25 years or 30 years since DC went broke in the 1990s, the city government has been like very, almost like ostentatiously responsible about its budgeting and, saving things for a rainy day and look how prudent we are, et cetera. And it was sort of a preemptive defense against Congress who might criticize them and so on. And that tendency, some people thought it was good and responsible and appropriate, and some people thought it was really stupid, like being incredibly miserly in good times when they didn't need to be in a city that still has a great deal of poverty. But that tendency has really, sort of fallen away. And this is sort of another data point to that. And, again, people are going to disagree about whether it is like the right and good and responsible thing to do, or whether it is, in fact, reckless, because there are, like, as we've discussed on this pod, there's a lot of like looming dangers out there. There's an estimate that like 25% of DC's office and commercial building space will be vacant by 2026. And that is, since a lot of the way the city makes money is by taxing commercial real estate, that's a really big deal. But the council's going ahead with this. And I don't know, it's what do you think of it?
So one thing I think that is interesting about this is that this enhancement in SNAP benefits runs from January to September of 2024. Christina Henderson said that the next phase will basically be figuring out how to fund a permanent enhancement. Mike, do you have any idea how they would try to go about that to make up that gap?
Depending on how you look at it, there's plenty already there, because we keep predicting shortfalls and then coming in over budget. Or depending on how you look at it, that's a dangerous and reckless thing to do, because we are going to be out of money and back in a very tough situation. And because of DC's unique status, that's going to give the Congress an opportunity to beat up on DC, meddle with DC, undo home rule, whatever nightmare scenario you want to imagine. I got to assuming that the Republicans remain in control of Congress, the fact that some of the beneficiaries of this are undocumented immigrants is going to be like it's like waving a red flag at a bull.
I mean, it sounds like a lot, but I mean, in the end, it can't be more than a couple $100 for each person, right?
Right. And which makes a big difference. And it also can't, I mean, look, the amounts here are like not that different than what it costs to build a scoreboard for a Major League Baseball stadium. So we are talking, on one hand, we're talking about like fairly puny amounts that may make a big difference to people. But we're, also talking about something that kind of gives an indication of how the people who govern the city think about money, or disagree about money.
So one thing that is also interesting about this is that, like, we keep predicting these shortfalls for how much money the government's going to have? Like, how does this keep happening? It seems like a kind of unusual mistake for a city to make. Is DC like known for being particularly conservative when it comes to this kind of budgeting?
Yeah, everybody seems very surprised.
I think historically, like post financial crisis of the 90s, yes, they were fairly conservative with budgeting. But I kind of think everybody, whether it's like your family or your city, has been pretty all over the place since pandemic, just because people really didn't know what was going to happen. And people still don't kind of like, there's enormous, like these changes that we talk about working from home and where people work and so on. These are going to have an enormous effect on like the budgets of places that rely on people, renting offices or spending money at lunchtime. And we don't quite know what the effect is going to be. So it could be terrible. It could be like not so bad. I think if you're making a budget, it's probably better to assume terrible and then be pleasantly surprised. Look, I think that this idea of like, if we have a surplus, let's do this and let's do that. That is, in its own way, an indication that we're in a political system that's at loggerheads. The mayor has been much more reticent about big investments than some members of the council, at least when the big investments involve social services. Since these are two forces with significant power on both sides, they kind of fix the way to get to live to fight another day is to sort of legislate in a way that says, if we have the money, let's do X, Y, and Z, but not let's do it immediately. Speaking of people fleeing DC, or not, the Pandas, which has been like almost like a symbol of Washington. They're on like tourist T-shirts. They're on like the logo of the zoo. There has been pandas in Washington since 1972, and there will not be as of the end of the year. What happened?
Yeah, so the pandas are leaving. It's pretty tragic. They're leaving in December. Right now, the 3 pandas that the zoo has are still out there doing their thing. You can see them, but they will be leaving back to China in December. So they arrived, like you said, at the zoo in 72, and it was sort of a diplomatic gesture at the time in the Nixon era. And they've really become DC's like biggest celebrities. Like everybody swarmed to see these pandas. Like they were the biggest attraction the zoo had ever had. Unfortunately, those original pandas did pass away. And in 2000, we got some new pandas, the ones that we currently have, Mei Xiang and Tian Tian. And this time, instead of being a gift, they were on loan, and we actually had to pay quite a bit of money for them. They had 4 cubs, all of which returned to China, except for Xiao Titi, which is the cub there now. And as per the original agreement, the pandas have to return to China. So they've sort of extended this lease on them several times, but this time they decided not to extend the lease, and they're not ours anymore.
Yeah. I feel like only one person would be happy that the pandas are leaving, and that would be our CEO, David Plotz, who had mentioned in one of our live tapings that he thinks the pandas are kind of a farce. You can listen to him explain himself here.
The thing that I hate most about the zoo is really the pandas. And I feel that it's an embarrassment for Washington that we are so obsessed with these pandas. I mean, the whole thing has become this real scam of the Chinese government where they are getting U.S. zoos to pay extraordinary sums to basically outsource their eugenic breeding program to us, and we pay to do it. But the pandas themselves are such a disappointment. I have been to that zoo just hundreds of times over my life, including as a kid. I came to Washington when right as Xing Xing and Ling Ling came. We came to Washington together. We grew up together. Unlike them, I successfully bred. I was able to manage that because I'm a human being and I have a motivation to breed. Pandas have no motivation to actually breed. They just laze around. They are just unpleasant. They have incredibly good PR because they're charismatic, they're beautiful. They've got this cool, we're black and white, we've got a cool look thing going on. But it's just ridiculous the way we anthropomorphize them and attribute goodwill and grace and niceness to these animals, which are just lumps. And I feel it's embarrassing that we get And the Washington Post gets so excited about it. And we Washingtonians get so excited about the panda.
David is perhaps Washington's leading pandaphobe. And he makes a couple of good points. And I, as a child of DC in the 70s and 80s, like you slept to that zoo and that was all like the end of the day was all uphill and it was hot and you had to wait a long time for the pandas. And then usually they would just be sitting around and they weren't very nice to each other even. I wrote my column in Politico about that, about the pandas and the politics of the pandas this week. And I thought of it as like a great big metaphor where the first pandas were like a goodwill gesture. It was great. We're friends with the Chinese now. It's the Cold War. They're our, ally against our mutual foe. The government of China had called it panda diplomacy. They used this endangered species. They would give them as gifts to favored countries. And then by the time these pandas who, couldn't breed and weren't very nice to each other or to the zoo, but by the time they died, and it was viewed as it was like the front page of the Post back when the front page mattered, and it was, sort of a civic mourning. By that point, China was a rich and powerful, emerging behemoth. And they were like, actually, no, this is not about like giving gifts to friends we're trying to cultivate anymore. This is like cash on the barrelhead of financial transaction. And it was like steep terms. It was $10 million for 10 years for the two pandas, or half the price of a stadium scoreboard. And any cub that they managed to have remained property of the Chinese Wildlife Association. And they successfully had a few cubs. Some of them have already been sent back. And now this lease is ending after being sort of extended. And it's at a time when like relations are pretty rocky. And there's this, particularly on the populist right, this great anti-China sentiment. And there was like a bill in Congress that was like, pandas born in the U.S. shouldn't be sent back to China where they won't be free.
That's right, because they have birthright citizenship by being born on U.S. soil, right?
Which is also they're in cages here in the U.S.
So silly. It's like a giant wildlife reserve over there, and they're like literally in a cage.
But anyway, it's like in Washington culture, though, they have been this enormous deal, even as the Chinese program led to there being pandas in other American zoos. They weren't like unique anymore. And now I think we got to figure out a new favorite zoo animal. And I'm stumped. What about you all?
Yeah, it's tough. They did say that they're working on bringing some pandas back to the zoo, but it's all very vague and nothing's concrete. So I think it is a smart idea to choose your new favorite animal. There have been quite a few cubs lately. There's been this baby lowland gorilla that's very cute. There's actually a voting going on right now to vote for DC's next zoo obsession. I think I might vote for the naked mole rats myself. It's a personal obsession. But what about you guys?
I gotta vote for the red panda. Ever since it escaped and just ran around Adams Morgan.
They are cute.
That was like my favorite "you had one job" of all time when the animal escaped.
Exactly, right? Like, what represents DC more than an animal breaking free of its cage, just trying to go party at Adams Morgan,
I was reading a lot about the pandas and how they got here. The U.S. gave a reciprocal gift when Joe and Lai presented the Nixons with the pandas. That gift was a pair of musk oxen. Somehow we're less popular in China than the pandas were here. Can you imagine?
Somehow, that's crazy. What?
And then I was reading that in 1975, the U.S. envoy to China, who was future President George H.W. Bush, is visiting the zoo in what was then called Peking. And he's like, hey, guys, where are those musk oxen anyway? And it was kind of awkward and no one answered. And it turned out that one of them had actually died. But not only was there no public mourning in Beijing the way there was here when Sing Sing and Ling Ling died, but apparently they hadn't even told anybody. So maybe we could, I don't even know if there are musk oxen in the zoo, but next time I go there, I'm going to visit and see.
I don't even know what a musk oxen looks like, if I'm being entirely honest. I have to look it up right now.
I mean, maybe this is the secret reason for these, for the new panda lease falling through, which is that they're still pissed that we gave them an uncool animal.
Oh, no, these are cool. These are huge. Wait, okay. Wow. Okay, so they're like an enormous bison-looking thing that's very hairy and like 1,000 pounds. That's pretty impressive. I mean, maybe not a panda, but it's cool.
All right, I'll meet you at the cage. All right, thank you, Julia and Kaela. It's awesome to have you here.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
We are off Monday. It's a long weekend. I hope you guys have a great one.
Will do. I'm flying to Germany, so peace out, y'all.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our lead producer is Priyanka Tilve. Our producer is Julia Karron. Our newsletter writer is Kaela Cote-Stemmermann. Our production assistant is Susanna Brown. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, you will love our newsletter too, which is written by Kaela, who is on the show today. Subscribe at dc.citycast.fm and make Kaela happy. We'll be back Tuesday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.